the Blairites, I'm going to call them, the group of people who were sort of like done with politics, but looking back at their party and being like, what have you done to it? Like, even these people were nuts in their day, but they're even looking back and being like, Jesus Christ, like, you guys have broken it beyond repair. So the first one I wanted to talk about was Trevor Phillips. For people who might know Trevor Phillips. So Trevor Phillips is a cool guy. So if you get up the first article, it's just him saying Labour cannot read the writing on the wall, and this is his assessment of why Labour is absolutely doomed. And Trevor Phillips, you might remember him if you don't, from his speech about sleepwalking into segregation. So he gave a warning about Britain's ethnic problems, in which you had people self-segregating into different groups, and therefore we are becoming a segregated society. That's the thing that gave him the most notoriety when he was in charge of the Equality Department.
It's being explicitly done, isn't there? Like a black-only university in London now that's been set up.
Well, not necessarily just that. Like, if you can see here, this is the documentary he's done, which I recommend everyone to go and watch, called Things We Won't Say About Race That Are True. It's on YouTube. It's free. I don't know if it's meant to be, but you can see here, like, he goes to Leicester and he just demonstrates the facts. Like, it's not his opinion or something that will happen. It is already happened, and this was in, I think it was like 2015 or 2011. Actually, I think it was made. You can see in the west side of Leicester, almost all white British, and then on the east side, you get the Asians, and you can see how they are segregated into their own groups by free choice. That is their decision. They decide where they want to live, and people have decided they wish to live among their own ethnic group. Sorry, own racial group in this case, as well. So that's the thing he warned about, and it was true. It's just factually true. This is a naturalism.
I mean, anyone who goes to any major city kind of knows that there are these things happening. Like in every city I've ever been to, there are areas where certain people of certain ethnicities live in greater concentration, and it's not really a surprise that this is being pointed out, because it's obvious to anyone who lives in a major city in the UK.
Even that, just anyone who's ever gone to university. Like, you've seen it yourself. You go to a university and people will self-segregate into the little groups because it's easier to talk. You see the Chinese students or the Chinese, so forth. Because it's just easier. They got the same cultural values, they got the same cultural things they want to do, they got the same languages. I mean, yeah, people segregate like that.
They're more likely to have something in common.
Not a surprise. I mean, I can't believe how he points this out and he's like, I'm so surprised by this. And I'm like, come on, mate. Like, I really respect Trevor Phillips, but I just don't understand how him and his colleagues, when they were in the Blair's government, did not see this coming. It's like, this is so obvious. I would have thought anyone who's ever been to university at least would get it, or just lives anywhere would get this point. But fine. So he goes through his article. The first thing he just mentions that he's had to bury a child, and that's very bad. So I'm sorry for that. But he says in there that some friends at the funeral witted to him, "So now you've had some practice in organising a burial, shouldn't you be offering your services to the Labour Party?" I mean, a bit of a place to put it up, but technically true. I mean, the Labour Party does deserve its grave. And he says in here, Labour bosses might have tried to spin the recent election results as mixed, pointing to mayoral victories in Manchester, London and the West Country, but they weren't mixed at all. They were unambiguously crushing rejection by the voters, who are showing no signs of bias remorse. True. Fact check. True.
Absolutely.
Trevor Phillips, always telling the facts. So one poll published this weekend suggested that were a general election to be held now, the Conservative majority would rise from 80 to 122 seats. That's how bad it is. If we can get the next link here, this is just the YouGov poll I assume he's referencing. If you can scroll down, you can see that the Conservatives polling at 45%, the Labour Party at 30%. I mean, just BTFO'd. Like, I don't know what's left for them. Like, they should not exist anyway, so more power to the Conservatives here. As long as the Labour Party then collapses, all's just well that ends well. So if we go back to the article, he says, despite it all, however, I am not ready to write a eulogy. Shame. You should. Anyone who experienced Labour's grim crawl back to reality after the 1983 catastrophe under Michael Foot knows that if we read the runes of defeat correctly, the party can rise again. Yeah, you really shouldn't, my friend. Like, I don't know why on earth you think this should be saved in the slightest. Because the weird thing is about Trevor Phillips, he's also like Blair, where they've been doing a bunch of stuff in government and then they spend the rest of their time essentially apologizing and going around being like, everything we did was bad, everything we did ended with all these results that are terrible, and we need to fix this. And it's like, yeah, if there was only someone who could have told you. So he says, also the fact they can rise back, I mean, it's certainly true. We shouldn't just accept that the Labour Party are dead and good, buried. Like, they might come back somehow, but they really should.
I believe that when it's at like 5%. I mean, it's still doing okay.
So he references, Tony Blair last week published a blistering analysis of the centre-left's eclipse and concluded that the Labour Party, quote, needs total deconstruction and reconstruction. Why can't we just end deconstruction? Like, just kill it. Yeah,
how about destruction?
Like, what do you need to bring it back at something? Let's just make something new. You don't need this waste of history. Anyway, so first, Labour lacks a compelling economic message. When the right is prepared to spend whatever it takes, according to Rishi Sunak, Labour's message of Tory austerity seems obtuse. True.
Good point.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of these things where, like, plenty of people on the right, centre-right of economics here, especially, have been critical of the Conservative Party, rightly. But politically, it's a savvy move. I mean, the fact that they've taken on, we'll just open the taps and spend loads of money.
I'm not exactly.
What Labour's got.
Yeah, I'm not exactly happy with how much money the Tories have been spending, but at the same time, they are also going to be stealing lots of Labour voters because they see, well, we've spent an inordinate amount throughout the pandemic, and they can't really say, well, they're the party of austerity anymore because they clearly aren't. Any old idiot can see that.
Yeah, they're burning everyone's money instead.
Yeah.
One of the interesting things as well I've seen, I remember during the Hartlepool election, they've been strategically spending money outside of pandemic spending, obviously. So when they get a new Conservative mayor, they'll be like, hey, you want a whole bunch of stuff? Like, we'll build this, that, and the other. We'll put a lot of investment here. And then it's a message to everyone around them in the red wall being like, hey, if you vote Conservative, you might get a load of stuff. And it's investments, so it's not a complete waste of money, like, making people dependent on the state by the looks of it. But again, not really happy with all the money being spent, let's be honest. Second, the left has little, if anything, to say about the technological revolution. Two of the most common occupations among Labour voters, retailing and transport, will be transformed by robots and artificial intelligence. Yet the party is content to let Mark Zuckerberg and Nick Clegg define the digital future. True. I mean,
yeah, that's a good
what
point.
have they got to say about that?
But it's funny, when you actually hear Blair talk, for example, he always talks about technology and the future and stuff like that. Like, it seems to be one of his pet subjects, and I'm seeing a little bit of that here as well, in that they're very much focused on the technological future, whereas the modern Labour Party, they kind of not too fussed about that. They try and promise people jobs that are kind of going to be redundant eventually, aren't they? And it seems a bit absurd.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't really thought about that point majorly either, but the Mark Zuckerberg and Nick Clegg thing, definitely true. Like, I don't know why on earth people are accepting of Nick Clegg being in charge of your Facebook posts. I mean, what is he, like president for international relations or something at Facebook? He spends all his time lecturing Mark Zuckerberg in Zoom calls. We must fight racism. Yeah. Third, he condemns the left's feeble response to identity-based movements like Black Lives Matter and Extinction Rebellion. Labour, in particular, has adopted their slogans uncritically and unthinkingly. True. I mean, just true diagnosis.
Absolutely.
I mean, this is what I mean. Like, Trevor Phillips is definitely, he's still Labour Party. He was in the Labour Party under Blair. Did a lot of damage. Has spent his time trying to fix some of that damage. Like Blair, going around saying I've effed up. But I respect him because his understanding of things is very data driven, and also he is on the money for a lot of the problems with the Labour Party, and also the fact that he's calling out there BLM. It's an identitarian movement.
Absolutely.
Left-wing identitarianism, it's an endless pit of just complete pointless discussion and trying to find out who's the most pure. So, true.
And even from kind of the Labour Party's own perspective, it's going to be putting people off voting for them if they're accepting of this sort of thing, because people know that it's imported from the United States. It doesn't really apply here. There's no...
doesn't even apply in the United States. I mean, take Michaela Bryant, the one we talked about. BLM endorsed Michaela Bryant, was like, how dare she be shot by the police? It was like, the lady with a knife who was about to stab another black girl, and you're like, the police who shot her and saved the other black girl's life, he's the evil one. No, he's a hero. He's a goddamn hero.
I should have said it implies even less here. That's sure. Probably the better way of putting it.
But it's just, I can't get over it. Like, BLM is such a pathetic organisation. I don't know why anyone gives them the time. Well, they want Marxism, that's why. So if you actually go to the New Statesman article, if we can get this up, which is just Tony Blair saying here, I love it. I love the title. Without total change, Labour will die. Total change? Total change. The whole thing. The whole thing has to change. Okay, then why are we saving it? Let it die. Why are you upset about it dying? If it needs total change, then the thing should die. The thing is corrupted to the core. The whole thing. Totality. It is ruined.
I do think I've heard kind of rumblings of Tony Blair actually being interested in becoming the leader of the Labour Party again and becoming elected. God. So this could...
Do it. If there is anyone to kill the Labour Party, go for it.
He's not exactly the most popular person anymore either, is he? To put it lightly.
Oh man, I can't imagine anything funnier. I mean, it's a great point as well. Like, who are they going to pick? So, Tony Blair says in here, we are sorry. Yeah, I wanted to mention we're actually planning like a based Blair podcast, in which a premium podcast with Carl, where we're just going to list some of the like hilarious stuff Tony Blair's done since he left office. Because you can see like when he's in there, he's like, I'm going to get power. Got power, had no idea what he was doing, messed everything up, and afterwards you can see him going around thinking about things and coming to the response that everything I did was bad. And I just want to go through the list of everything he said that he's like, yeah, I effed up big time. But that's just a teaser for another time.
I'm looking forward to that.
So he says in here, a progressive party seeking power which looks askance at the likes of Trevor Phillips, Sarah Khan, or J.K. Rowling is not going to win. In case you're wondering who these people are. So Trevor Phillips is demonized within the Labour Party for saying that different races as groups have different habits. Just a truism. There's no debating that whatsoever. Sarah Khan is been takfired from the Labour Party for saying that some Muslims are terrorists. Yeah,
that's factually correct though. Like it's obvious.
It's pathetic. And then J.K. Rowling for saying women aren't women. I mean, this is how pathetic the Labour Party is. These people are all kicked out of it. Why? Because they said things that are true. So he says that progressive politics needs to debate these cultural questions urgently and openly. They do plenty of debating, mate. Debate all the time. Debate about who's the purest. That's all they do. Who's the most oppressed? I mean, there's plenty of debate. It's just garbage because it's through the left-wing perspective. So we go back to the Trevor Phillips article. He says, depressingly, though, it's hard to imagine anyone in the Labour leadership assembling a critique of this coherence on force. And it's impossible to name any Labour grandee, including those who became grand on Blair's coattails, having the courage to condemn the party for its capitulation to identity politics. Yes, that is why the whole thing should be burnt to the ground. If the whole thing, as you say, totality, it's ruined, why are you trying to save it? Why are you not writing that eulogy, Trevor? Because you should be. What Blair doesn't say is that demographics matter. In a brilliant essay in the New European, Peter Klenner points out that the typical Labour voter is no longer a blue-collar trade unionist working in a mine, shipyard, steelworks, or a factory. The emotional connection with Labour, built on single industry towns and reinforced by local churches, working men's club, and active trade union branches, won't be coming back. Blue-collar collectivists, the veteran pollster says, God, I hate that term, blue-collar collective. I mean, it just tells you everything that's wrong with it. Now constitute fewer than 3% of the electorate. So the traditional Labour base of what they consider, the stereotype Labour voter from, the old days, 3% of the electorate now. Nada, nothing, gone. Yet much of the left still lives in a pre-millennial fantasy where it doesn't sound ridiculous to address your colleagues as comrade. Or comrade, as they like to say. True. Labour should be garnering votes among young, university-educated private renters disillusioned by the realization that they may never buy or inherit a home. Prices are rising and parents are living longer. Yet in the London Assembly elections, it was the Greens that won the extra seat courtesy of voters christened the educated left-behinds. God, isn't that a condemnation of the universities? The guy's like, yeah, these are the educated left-behinds.
And they're voting as left-wing as possible.
You got the most privileged position of going to a university. I mean, getting a university education is not a small thing in the slightest. They had the privilege, a privilege in this case, and they've gone through that and they've become a left-behind. You would have done better digging ditches than going to university. It's essentially what he's saying there. I love it. I love everything about it. As for ethnic minorities, the left's casual racism in treating all people of colour, God, ditch the words, Trevor, as one bloc which it could take for granted has been proven disastrous. Labour's support in deprived Muslim neighbourhoods seems to have held steady, but in West London, home to the country's largest concentration of Indian and Sikh heritage Britons, Sean Bailey, the Conservative candidate for mayor, outpolled Labour for the first time. Good. It's a shame the Muslim constituency of this country don't see the same thing, which is that the Labour worldview of everyone's a collective is not desirable, does not produce good outcomes, and is immoral in and of itself.
It's only a matter of time, though, before the Islamic voting bloc, as he calls it, kind of rejects the Labour Party if they carry on going down this identity politics route, and they won't call a woman and such.
I hope they take it over.
They're going to become very alienated.
Do you remember we did a report on Labour Party published a thing into their own party, an investigation calling their own party Islamophobic, and on the back of the cover they just had the Labour logo and the Islamic symbol together on a black flag, so it just became known as the Black Flag of Labour. So I hope they take it over. I want to see the black flag of Labour flying at every conference. So he ends, many Labour activists will relish condemning Blair, the party's Daniel, but they would do but they would do better to heed the message they have been given by the almighty electorate. That's certainly true. I mean, if we can just go to the next image here, I mean, just as a summation of progressive leftism, you can get at the Facebook post. I just saw this morning, Liverpool FC posting something. I'm not even going to read any of their text. Just look at the image. Look at that. IDAHOP Christian symbol or T, God knows. LFC stands against homophobia, transphobia, and biphobia. What are we even looking at? What is this? I mean,
half the alphabet.
It's so meaningless. It's unreal. Like I just can't get over. What message does that tell you? Does it tell you anything?
I don't really know. I guess they're virtue signalling, really, aren't they? That's all they're trying to do. They're just... I mean...
God.
I've never even heard the term biphobia before.
I don't even know what half of those letters even stand for in this context. It's just so absurd. I mean, this is where the Labour Party's at. This is where modern left-wing thinking, progressive thinking is at. And if this isn't worth burning to the ground, Trevor, I don't know what is. So in case you're not convinced, I remember people liked the previous clip, so I made another one. So if we get the next clip up, this is from Labour Party 2019 conference. Let's enjoy.
Comrades, I'm a failure.
Comrades. Comrades.
Hi, comrades. One of our references back here is talking about gender pay gap legislation, and that if you want to bring a case, you have to be a man or a woman. Now, if you're in transition or if you're a non-binary person, you have to then go to that and say you're a man or a woman.
Proud and honoured to be leading this motion on behalf of all those women at Labour Women's Conference earlier this year.
We have a segregated
As part of the review, an expert panel will consider how climate change and its impact are taught from primary school onwards, as part of a broader project of decolonising and diversifying a curriculum that is part of an inclusive and equitable national education service.
All the buzzwords.
There should be no place for grammar schools.
What if we went into the next general election when saying, with Labour in power, we will abolish Eton?
Boris Johnson, Donald Trump, these are just some of the bad, racist men who are combining. And we are good people who need to associate.
Common ownership of the production, distribution and exchange of knowledge itself.
But this country is only what it is because of centuries of immigration and the cultural enrichment that people come into this country.
Bet that wouldn't poll popularly.
The EU referendum was fought by our opponents on the issue of immigration, taking back control of borders and ending free movement. But we won't stop until Yarl's Wood, Brook House, Harmondsworth and all the other detention centres, these appalling places, are closed.
We can't be an anti-racist party while vulnerable migrant women suffer in cells.
Illegal immigrants. That's what they're talking.
We also need positive action to diversify our workforce from the ground up and from the top down.
And the values we hold dear, like inclusion and diversity, equality, they are all being threatened. We've already seen the University of Glasgow make available £20 million in reparations. Other banks and businesses must follow.
We should stop the denial, deflections, and start acting like a party which gives a damn about being a safe and welcoming space for Jews. Because, conference, whatever you think, and whatever you shout, take it from me. It really isn't.
The idea that we are not actually taking this Modi seriously as a fascist, as a danger to the rights of Kashmiris to self-determine their own future, is egregious.
Modi, the past Hitler, or the present Trump.
Stand against hate, stand against racism, stand against genocide, stand against extremism, stand against Modi.
I say to Boris Johnson, bring it on.
Dude, get in a fight.
Yeah, lose all their seats, that's what. Look at this staying. Yeah, I mean, how many more of these clips do I have to make, Trevor, until we just agree, yeah, death to the Labour Party? There's nothing to be saved. That's all.
If you enjoyed this segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can watch the full broadcast live every weekday at 1 p.m. UK time on lotuseaters.com.